it's been a long day, and I hope this will be a fun one. It's definitely a different presentation than the one that we saw. We're going to be looking at AI governance in a higher ed context, which is a little bit different than commerce and private sector. So I hope you'll find this equally as interesting. I'm going to start my presentation with a land acknowledgement. I know my time is short, but I think it's important to do this. So this event is taking place on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. And I acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which peoples of the world, we peoples of the world, now gather. And what that means in the context of my presentation is I'm acknowledging that the digital spaces that I build, and I hope the digital spaces that you build as well, should reflect commitments made by our governments, our institutions, and our companies in regard to respecting Indigenous peoples. And as this presentation is going to be made available online, I believe this acknowledgement extends to locations of online viewers. So I'd encourage you to visit www.whos.land to learn more about the Indigenous people in your area. So I'm excited to be here at Evolve Drupal today. I'm going to talk about content governance in AI, in addition to being really interested in talking to you about how you're approaching AI governance at your companies and institutions. So I hope you'll connect with me actually if you go to the event later on. I also missed last year's event, so that was major FOMO, so I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Joyce Peralta, and I'm Manager Digital Communications at McGill University right here in Montreal. And this is a picture of me, smiling me, standing at the summit of Mount Narrohe National Park in New Zealand. For those of you who might not be familiar with this park, this is an active volcano on the North Island of New Zealand. If it's looking familiar, it's because this was Mordor in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm actually standing on top of Mount Doom in this picture. And you can't tell from the picture, but the winds were in excess of 100 kilometers an hour that day, and 2 people were evacuated from the mountain. So I remember this moment. I'm smiling. I come to the top. I see this amazing view, and I think, wow, this is spectacular. And I then descended safely. But in hindsight, I have to ask myself, was this an acceptable risk? And maybe another day I might have been one of those people that would have been evacuated off the mountain. And I wanted to include this in my slide deck because to me it sometimes parallels how I sometimes feel about our institutional use of AI. There are, without doubt, amazing things that we can do with AI, and the speed at which we can do them is amazing. But we have to accept when we're using AI that any inherent risks there might be, risks with reliability or ethical risks like inherent bias or privacy and security. These things can only be partially addressed by any precautions we might take. After all, I don't have the capacity to thoroughly evaluate every source that might be accessed. So we're using AI, we've got these great big smiles on our faces, but there are inherent risks to the things that we're doing. So I know some of you are thinking, well, this is easy, just limit your data sources or check your data sources. So let's take a look at the complexity of our web ecosystem and our content ecosystem at McGill. We have 1,000 public websites on our centrally supported CMS. We have another 500 custom sites that are centrally hosted on servers but use different platforms. And these sites integrate with hundreds of internal systems that we have behind the scenes. So it's a really complex, continually evolving ecosystem that displays a very diverse set of content. And to drive that point home, this is the number of weekly content edits happening across just those 1,000 Drupal-powered sites. So you see most weeks we have between 6,000 and 8,000 edits per week happening on those sites, and that's just those Drupal sites, with the very smallest number, of course, happening the week of Christmas in week 53. I don't know why people are editing during those days, but they are. And the largest number happening week 34, which not surprisingly is just before our new academic year starts. So to make this even more complicated, we have policy documentation and best practices that are also managed in a decentralized manner. So, for example, our privacy and security documentation is generated by our IT department. Our accessibility documentation is managed by our equity team. So there's a lot of complicated, continually evolving legislation that is connected to government legislation that's also continually evolving, that we have to keep in mind when we're considering how we generate content. So, how do we keep this ecosystem in sync? What option do we have to create optimized content that's reliable and accessible and meets our user needs? Well, for starters, we have our digital standards. We launched our digital standards about 5 years ago, and this is a series of 9 standards that we use to tell people across our institution, the 1,500 people that generate content, how to generate content in a way that is going to meet user requirements. And I'll read these standards out to you just so that you're able to read the small, in case you can't read the small text. So we have be user focused. That's our number one. There's a reason why it comes first. We put our users first. Next, support decisions with data. Then be consistent. As you can imagine, consistency is a big problem here. Make sites accessible and inclusive is one we talk about a lot, and it's one that our community is very interested in talking about as well. Then we have be thorough in your process. My favorite standard is less is more. I think it's the area where we have the biggest room for growth, I think, and improvement on our sites. Then protect websites and users' data, build, evaluate, and revise, and collaborate and share. And in addition to all of our standards, our 9 standards, we have resources and services to support alignment with our standards. So our governance framework, our broader governance framework. By the way, this presentation is focusing on our content governance, but I'm doing a presentation tomorrow at CMS Connect about our broader digital governance and how it connects to AI. So there's 2 different sides of the picture there. But our governance framework, we have training and self-serve resources to help people align with our standards. We have consultation support for large, complex projects, our regular communications, and new this year we have a web registry which just launched. I might speak about this at an upcoming event. This is a long-awaited opportunity for us to take a broad look at our overall web ecosystem and keep an eye on the ongoing health of our web ecosystem. But most of all, and I think this is a very key to the success of our governance framework, we have engaged communities of practice. We have people across our institution who contribute to our efforts to evolve, promote, teach, and follow our standards. And it's these collaborations that create an environment of trust and mutual support that underpins our governance framework. If we didn't have engaged communities of practice, we would just have another set of documentation on top of our existing documentation. And this slide shows an example of our communities of practice in motion. It's from a meeting for a project that we led to map the digital journey of our students across the many, many platforms that they have to navigate while they're at McGill. And these types of exercises give us an idea not only of how we need to work together, but also how the individual tasks that we do are actually connected in the eyes of the students. So everything's great, right? We have despite these complexities, we have our defined standards, we have our mature governance framework, and we have our engaged communities of practice. Solution to all of our problems. Well, not quite. Every now and then, something happens to shake up the stability of our governance framework. I've been building websites now for about 30 years, and I've worked in higher education for 20 years. So I've seen a few of these experiences come in the past. I think in the early 2000s, I remember 2 of the universities that I worked at moved from a homegrown CMS into an enterprise CMS. Social media, of course, was another moment where there was impact. Recently, the pandemic, I think, impacted our governance framework as well. And now we have the growing use of AI. And last year we began to take steps to evolve our standards and governance to include use of AI. And this is one of the announcements that we shared about these updates. And rather than creating brand new governance, we decided to build on our existing governance. And this allowed us to take advantage of the existing awareness of our standards. We had processes in place to be able to follow up if there were compliance issues, and just the ability to have, I think, a recognized and a community of support around following our standards. So, this brings me back to the photo at the beginning of my presentation, which was of me standing on top of Mount Nararohi, where I talked about the amazing possibilities and the inherent risks of AI. When I first started using that image in my presentations, I thought, oh, maybe this is a bit of an extreme take on how we feel about AI. But I don't know if anybody recognizes this picture. This is from Dries Buytaerts' blog. He posted a post a couple of days ago that was called AI and the Great Digital Agency and Bundling, and he was talking about the impact on agencies and what AI was going to mean in terms of the future of agencies. And this is the quote that he shared. It has a similar sentiment to the one from my photograph. It's from the Hacker News site, and it was posted by a user named Simon Willison, and he said, "To misuse a woodworking metaphor, I think we're experiencing a shift from hand tools to power tools. You still need someone who understands the basics to get good results with the tools, but they're not chiseling the furniture by hand anymore. They're throwing heaps of wood through the table saw instead. More productive, but more likely to lose a finger if you're not careful." And I think that parallels what's happening in our environment as well. This is a great post, by the way. I've heard a few people talk about the future of agencies in relation to AI, and I'd encourage you to go check that out. So, when it comes to throwing our content through the table saw, so to speak, there are our existing content presents more than a few opportunities to lose a proverbial thumb or two. So far, I've mainly been talking about creating new content and our governance for creating new content, but we have a large amount of existing content that needs to be optimized. It needs to be optimized for AI, and it needs to be optimized in general. And here's one of the initiatives that we are working on to address this. We're doing a migration right now into Drupal 10, and in this project we are flagging sites that haven't been updated in the past year, so that we can potentially, the announcement that we're sending out to administrators is that if they don't keep their sites up to date, they're going to be removed, because we can't afford anymore to keep content public if it's not being maintained on an ongoing basis. So AI is forcing us to be more diligent, I think, about addressing problems with irrelevant, outdated content, which is a positive thing, but it's causing us to have to do initiatives like this one. We're also having to think very carefully about how AI is impacting our best practices about being user-focused. A few of the ways our practices have been evolving, for example, I now regularly use AI when I'm doing user experience research. I don't know if there are other UX people in the audience. Are we all using AI to some extent? Yeah, it's a bit of a slippery slope, isn't it? So you really have to think about where is it appropriate and where is it not appropriate to use AI. I've been experimenting with this, and there are some things that AI doesn't do very well. For example, subjective analysis is not one of its strong suits right now. There's a few other things that are problematic. There's a lot of evaluation required if you're going to use data and put it through an AI analysis. So that's one of the issues. But when using AI for data analysis, I've also noticed there are some potentials to speed up some of the processes. So there's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B situation, but there's opportunity there. We just have to think carefully about how it's used. Another area for consideration is our communities of practice. How can we foster those communities of practice for responsible use of AI? For us, this means creating opportunities for shared learning and discussion about AI, facilitating collaboration by promoting shared shared processes and methodologies that we can all follow, and identifying communication channels for AI-centered discussions. But there's been some problems with fostering communities of practice for responsible use of AI. There was a huge reaction when we started to encourage people to use AI. Everything from people completely throwing up their hands and saying, I don't want to participate in this conversation at all, to people who just wanted to dive in and do everything with AI. So we have a huge diversity of how people are reacting to use of AI. So this is one strategy that we're following to try and encourage people to use AI in a way in which they can be comfortable and be confident that they're doing things that are productive and positive. So we're encouraging people to limit the scope, to think carefully about the tasks that they're using AI for, to provide very specific context about why they're using AI and what they're trying to accomplish, to make it easy to check outputs. So what can we include in the prompt to make it easy for us to evaluate the information, whether it's correct, to evaluate results for return on investment, not just in terms of how the content is performing, but how does that balance against the amount of time saved. And then to learn to do things with and without AI as well. And I think this is particularly important for people at the beginning of our careers, because I feel that had I not, at the beginning of my career, had the opportunity to learn to do things manually, for example, with user research activities, I don't think that I'd be able to strategize in these areas at this point. So it's very useful. The themes that I've covered today about how our content governance is being impacted by AI, this isn't an extensive list. I think I've only scratched the surface of all the things that we could possibly talk about. But I do think I've touched on some areas that are of key importance for us. That's evolving our existing standards and governance for use of AI, which opens up opportunities to leverage our existing buy-in and our community of practice, establishing those strategies and initiatives for ensuring optimization both of new and existing content, defining appropriate use of AI for user research activities, and fostering communities of practice by coaching members of our community to use AI responsibly. So my closing thought, I actually hope we stop talking about AI governance. I think AI is one of the tools that we use, and it's not a good idea for us to create governance at such a granular level. In our environment, it creates opportunities for inefficiencies and inconsistencies. We already have plenty of opportunities for that. And the other thing that I think about AI governance that I notice is difficult in our governance is that our communities of practice have difficulty feeling comfortable about the use of AI. So all that said, I don't think we need AI governance. I think we need good, effective governance that acknowledges use of AI so that we can have communities of practice that embrace its use. And that's my presentation. So, oh, yes? Sorry.
Would you say that AI made your job more complicated or something more easier?
I think at the moment it's making it more complicated because we're going through a transition period. I think it has potential to make it easier, but I think we really need to think very carefully about where those areas are and how we can best leverage those opportunities. So at the moment, I think the verdict is out about how this is going to end up. I don't think anybody's figured this out at this moment. We're all here, we're all talking about this is what's going to happen with AI. Nobody knows. And I think if you've been around for a while, you've probably seen this happen. Somewhere the ball's going to settle and we'll see what happens at that moment. Is it going to be better? Is it going to be more complicated? I don't know, but I think it's promising that there could be improvements here, there could be efficiencies. But yeah, we're at one of those moments where things could go really great or they could go really bad.
And what would be bad, going bad, what would it mean?
What could be bad?
For your job, for the content that you produce?
Well, for me, I want to say in terms of the content that I create and the websites that we build, I'm not looking for people. I don't think our team is looking for people to come do our website. I don't think that we're looking for our content to perform in any way. The thing that we're looking for is to help our students become educated. We're looking to improve their journeys. And I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty right now about what education is going to look like. I think what our university is, the role of our university, there's lots of things that could be bad and could be good. So I guess to answer your question, what would be really bad? I don't think I can see that right now. What I want is for students to be educated and to have a good experience being educated. So, yes, sorry, I think you were next.
How do you ensure that your own content is optimized and up to date with AI?
So I think the main thing we need to do here is clean up irrelevant content. So we have too large a pool of content right now. We might have too many people creating that content. So up until this point, it hasn't been as much of an issue because we were able to create interfaces to steer people to the correct answers. And that's what we've always thought, oh, we can have UX, have user experience exercises, we can think about how we need to build these interfaces, and we can steer people to the correct answers. Now people are just going to come across, it's much easier for them to discover content and to be influenced by content that's out of date. So we really need to clean things up and remove outdated content. And then we can think about, okay, in terms of what content is left, how can we make sure that keeps updated and optimized and up to date? So lots of cleanup. Andrew?
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm dovetailing from this question. How much of, or do you have a perspective of how much of that future student experience won't be on your website, or will actually be in some sort of chat AI-powered interface?
I mean, I'm not an educator. I'm an administrator, so I feel like that conversation is happening at a different level. But I do. There's a lot of things that are shifting right now and changing, and I don't think we've had this. If someone had figured out education would be this solution would be monetized in some way, and it's not right now because we don't know. So yeah. Yes.
What's the angle around disclosure? You know, you're educating about the good use cases and you're working on adoption, but what about disclosure? Is it encouraged? I mean, how transparent is it?
We're working on creating language for people to identify different levels of use of AI, because we're recognizing AI is being used in just about everything these days, but we don't want to have thousands of AI notices on our websites and with our content. So we're figuring out, okay, depending on how AI is being used and how often it's being used when in content creation, what kind of notice should be accompanied, should accompany that content on their sites.
So do you have something in place, or you're thinking about it?
We're thinking about it, and it's being worked on right now. We do have a very blanket statement in place now, but we're recognizing it needs to be a lot more granular than that, because I think our language right now is so vague that it's stopping people from using it, because some people are using it for very small things that, yeah, we need to figure that out. So yes.
Given the complexity of your ecosystems with like thousands of websites and lots of content, existing ones that you want to create, how do you consider all the risks behind it, or like in terms of confidentiality, in terms of ecological impact as well? Like, is it worth it all? Like to create content?
I used to talk more about environmental impact in earlier presentations that I did, but I understand there's new technologies that have come out that allow you to limit the amount of energy that's used and to lessen. So I think there's still, you have to be critical of these things, but in terms of environmental impact, I'm hoping that there is going to be improvements in this area, because it was looking very dire.
Do you educate at all your students to the communities of practice, for instance?
So we did have an event a little while back where we talked about these different impacts. We had a panel of people. When I showed the digital standards that we have. Those standards are managed by different stakeholders across our community. So you had a panel of those people come in, people from IT who could talk about privacy and security, our equity office to talk about accessibility, and other aspects. We couldn't cover all aspects of the ethics of AI and its impact on our governance, but we did have conversations about that. We need to have more conversations about that, but we started to have conversations. In terms of I guess what the penalties, the results could be, I think we don't have that information. It's not stated on our site in terms of AI, but it is stated on our site in terms of our standards in general. So the importance of aligning with accessibility and inclusion best practices, for example, we have information about this on our website. So I think that's another benefit to building off our existing governance, is we don't have to establish new governance just for use of AI. Anyone else have any questions? So thank you.